Thank you, everybody, for having me out and listening to me this morning. It's really special standing here some 35 years after I was sitting in an assembly seat over at the old Wallace Hall. And it's especially cool because my two boys are here now. And thank you, Mr. Joya, for asking me to speak about how my practice in plastic surgery just continues to evolve with technology and innovation. But first, I want to let you know something you probably don't appreciate yet, but one of the greatest assets that you will take with you when you're done here at MBA is the ability to be a lifelong student. Whether you choose a profession that's a doctor, a lawyer, a banker, whether you want to build golf courses or be a boat captain, you got to stay up with technology because it is expanding at a lightning pace. Let's take a look at my profession of medicine. In 1950, it was estimated that medical knowledge would double every 50 years, which means essentially what you learned in medical school would make you a good doctor probably throughout your entire career. Nowadays, in 2021, medical knowledge and technology doubles every 3 months. And it's fascinating. It's exciting to be part of this and see this unfold right in front of us. As a plastic surgeon over the past 20 years, I've tried to maintain a very broad scope of practice. I've been blessed to be involved with the care of patients who have gone through trauma, car wrecks and burns. I've helped people rebuild after surgeries for cancer. I've worked with babies really on mission trips around the world who were born with birth defects like cleft lip and palate. It's been such a blessing. Nowadays, I'm a little more simple. Most of the surgeries I do are what we call elective or cosmetic surgery. I'm sure things you guys have heard about, liposuction and tummy tucks and facelifts. But regardless, in my field, innovation is taking us to a new level. You know, it seems like every month or two. So along those lines, I've always tried to stay in front, and I've created entities or ventures to help deliver my patients the best care, most up-to-date care as possible. I've created skincare lines that are safe and have fewer chemicals, so they're safe to use. I've created plastic surgery emergency services to make sure that patients coming to emergency rooms get the care they need quickly. I currently run an age management clinic at my office, which utilizes really state-of-the-art lab testing and really advanced therapeutics to help slow down the aging process for people. But what I really wanted to talk to you today about is my latest venture. It's called My Wound Doctor. My Wound Doctor is a technology-enabled web-based healthcare platform that supports patients who are suffering from life-threatening or limb-threatening wounds, wounds that just won't heal. We call them chronic wounds. Next slide. Chronic wounds are a big problem, not just in the U.S., but worldwide. Pretty much anybody could get a chronic wound, but they typically affect people with underlying illnesses like diabetes, heart disease, lung disease, smokers, people overweight, elderly who are bedridden. And you can see from this slide the impact in the U.S. alone. It's estimated that 2 to 3% of our population lives with a chronic wound currently. So that's about 8.5 million people currently are struggling with chronic wounds. It cost our healthcare system last year $80 billion, and that number is just going up. We think somewhere between 60 and 70,000 people this year are going to die from complications related to their chronic wounds, and that number is not coming down. And a little interesting statistic, if a chronic wound is not treated appropriately and a patient requires an amputation of a foot or a leg because of that wound, there's a 70% chance that patient won't be alive in 5 years just because of the underlying disease. So despite all the advancements in technology and everything we know about wound healing and what causes wounds and all this money we're spending on wound care, the problem's not getting better. Next slide. So how do we take an individual, and pardon me for these slides, I hope I don't ruin anybody's lunch. I tried to tame it down a bit because we see some pretty bad wounds through our console. But how do we take this patient in the upper corner who's had this diabetic foot wound for over 3 years, obviously risking his limb, interfering with his life? How do we take that patient and in 3 months, like we did here, get him healed and get him back to his daily routine? Or the patient in the other photograph, how do we take that patient who at an outlying community hospital had a complication from surgery, a bad wound infection, and was in and out of the hospital getting this wound treated? How do we take that patient and in 2.5 months heal him at home and get him back to his life? Next slide. Well, the answer is technology. It's virtual care. It's digitally touching patients every day, which is not possible with our current system. We call it telemedicine. So my team and I, we've developed apps that are available for iPhones and Androids. We've created English versions, Spanish versions, but what these apps do, it enables the caregiver, the patient, a loved one, a neighbor, to take a picture of the wound, enter the pertinent information that we need to come up with a care plan, and transmit that data to us. And my team then evaluates these wounds as they come into what we call our care console. And what you can see from this slide is we don't just see a picture. We get a lot of information about the patient. Are they diabetic? Do they smoke? What medicines do they take? But the software in our application also measures the wound precisely, the circumference. And that's important because we can make sure that our therapeutics are making that wound smaller and progressing towards healing. The other analytics of our software evaluate the health of the wound bed and the surrounding skin. So obviously, you want that pie graph to be totally red. That means it's a healthy wound. If it's black or green, that means you got a lot of work to do. Next slide. So based on the data we receive through our console, we prescribe a treatment plan for a patient. And these plans are based on a few dozen protocols that I've written, that I've used through the years for my patients, that I know work, they're easy to deploy, and they're very inexpensive. So we send out a care plan, but we not only send out a care plan, we send out the exact supplies that that patient or their caregiver needs to take care of that wound for 2 weeks. They come from our fulfillment center in Pennsylvania. From the main ingredient down to the Band-Aid, they get the supplies delivered overnight to their home. In the box of supplies, there's written instructions on how to care for that wound and how to use the supplies. Through the app, they'll get a digital care plan, and embedded in the digital care plan are little hyperlinks under each step of the care plan that are short little 30-second video clips that I've created to show patients how to do wound care, how to apply a dressing. So education is key in our platform. Next slide, please. So this is a little cartoon on how it works. So that first station is the point of care. That's the patient with the wound, and that's the caregiver. They download the app, the picture is taken, and then it's transmitted to our care team. Next slide. So that's our care team, which honestly consists of 3 nurses, 2 doctors, and I got 2 business guys. So we have a very small team. We evaluate the data, evaluate the wound, and we issue a treatment plan back to the patient. Next slide. And then that treatment plan, the protocol goes to our fulfillment center in Pennsylvania. The package of supplies are put together for that patient specifically. And then, no, we don't use drones, maybe one day soon, but that, next slide. That package is received by the patient and the caregivers with written and digital instructions and videos on how to use the products. Next slide. So This form of virtual wound care is actually providing more solutions than traditional healing. We're educating patients, we're improving their quality of life, we're empowering patients and their caregivers to take care of themselves. It's solving the problem of transportation. I mean, people need wound care every day, but how many people can get in a car and drive to a hospital every day, particularly people who live in remote areas? And what we're seeing with our data, and right now we've taken care of over 5,000 wounds, is that we are getting better clinical outcomes. People are healing at a higher rate, they're healing more quickly, and they're healing at home, which is important. And what that does is it lowers costs. We did a financial analysis of our first 5,000 wounds, and it's costing about $21 a day for us to provide care, and that's our consultation services and the supplies. I mean, do you think about it? A transportation cost alone, say we have a lot of clients in prison, to put a prisoner in an armored vehicle with 3 guards and transport him to the hospital, in and of itself costs somewhere between $2,500 and $3,000. So that's a lot of wound care if we can keep the patient from having to go to the hospital. Next slide. So this kind of summarizes where we're at these days. This is our customers. Like I said, we have 2 physicians, we have 3 wound care nurses, 1 in Pennsylvania, 1 in Tennessee, and 1 in Mississippi. Our other doctor, other than me, is in South Carolina, and I have 2 operations people that help run the company. We are currently in 22 states, and that number is growing every week. Our main clients are prisons. We service about 180 state prisons and do their wound care. We got about 50 county jails. We do a lot of work with home health in several of these states. And I'm excited, we just launched on a Native American Indian reservation in Oklahoma, the Creek Nation. There's about 80,000 natives who get their health care through the nation. And you don't know this, but Native Americans are particularly a high risk for wounds because there's a high rate of diabetes and obesity and smoking. So I got high hopes that we're going to really heal some people on the reservation. And even more exciting, yesterday when I was out taking care of my cattle, I got an urgent text from Uganda. We just opened services with a nonprofit organization called One Health that provides health care to people of developing countries. And we got our first wound from Africa. It was a lady who had had surgery and went back to her village, and the surgical incision opened up, it was infected, and they needed some answers. You know, it's hard to ship supplies quickly to them, so what we have done is we pre-stocked their shelves at nearby clinics in Uganda so they can just pull the supply pack they need off the shelf and start treating that patient. But these pictures can come in every day. We can touch and evaluate that patient every day it's needed until she's healed. And what this allows us to do, and what's missing these days, is technology allows us to touch patients on a daily basis, and that's what's required to get these wounds healed. It allows us to standardize care. I mean, you could have 12 plastic surgeons looking at a wound, and you would get 12 different opinions on what needed to be done, and all of them are right, except one may cost $5 and one may cost $5,000. So what we have done is we've made wound care in Oregon the same as wound care in Florida, and now the same as wound care in Africa. We've really reduced the cost of care, and we've taken away that transportation factor. And I'll leave you with one cool thing we're working on right now, is we filed for a patent through the U.S. Patent and Trade Office for artificial intelligence around wound care. So I see pretty soon, once our software is written, is that anybody around the world, you could be a native Alaskan 500 miles from the closest clinic, but as long as you have an internet signal, you can take a picture of your wound, transmit it to us, but before we even take a look at it, the computer predicts what I would do, and that package of supplies gets sent straight out to that patient. So really the human input is just to oversee the computer and correct any mistakes the computer may make, so one day that computer is 100% accurate. So anyway, that's what we're doing, and I really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.